USS Thresher was the lead submarine of her class of nuclear-powered attack boats in the 1960s. In April of 1963, the USS Thresher atomic submarine left port to perform a series of test dives off Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and never came back.
A quiet descent into the Atlantic, a final message full of static, then silence so complete it would last half a century. In 1963, the United States ship Thresher vanished beneath the waves, its fate buried under secrecy, and its truth twisted by time. What really happened to the Navy's most advanced submarine, and why was it kept hidden? To answer that, we have to begin not with the mystery, but with the machine itself. A vessel built to rule the depths, forged in Cold War urgency, and promised to be unsinkable. The submarine that shouldn't have failed. In the early 1960s, the United States ship Thresher represented the cutting edge of naval warfare, an apex predator designed to stalk Soviet submarines before they could ever threaten American shores. Launched in 1961 from the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, she embodied a new class of fast attack submarines built for stealth, speed, and survival in the crushing blackness of the deep ocean. Her sleek teardrop hull, modeled after the experimental United States ship Albacore, allowed her to slice through water with unprecedented agility, and her pressure hull, forged from HY-80 high-strength steel, gave her the capacity to dive deeper than nearly any other submarine in existence, more than 1,300 feet below the surface. What truly set the Thresher apart, however, was her technological sophistication. At her bow, a massive BQQ-2 sonar array could pick up the whisper of a rival's propeller from miles away. Armed with torpedoes and a revolutionary anti-submarine missile known as Subrock, she could deliver a nuclear payload to a target hidden beneath hundreds of feet of ocean. But it wasn't just her capabilities that inspired confidence. Every weld, every system, every line of code had been vetted through years of rigorous testing. To naval leadership, Thresher was more than a machine. She was a statement of dominance in the Cold War's most silent battlefield. When she returned for a final series of post-overhaul deep dive tests in April 1963, no one expected anything but flawless performance. And yet, what followed would haunt the United States Navy for decades. The last dive. The sea that morning was eerily calm. Around 6:30 a.m., the Thresher slipped beneath the Atlantic, roughly 220 miles east of Cape Cod, escorted at the surface by the submarine rescue ship, United States ship Skylark. From above, the water was glassy, reflective, a deceptive piece that masked the pressure building far below. This was to be a routine test dive, part of her post-overhaul evaluation. On board were 129 souls, elite submariners, engineers, and shipyard specialists, all confident in the vessel's strength and legacy. As Thresher descended in slow, spiral steps, she maintained regular communication with the Skylark through an underwater telephone known as Gertrude. Every 100 feet, the submarine paused to run system checks. Everything appeared normal. By 9 a.m., Thresher was approaching her test depth of 1,300 feet. At that depth, pressure exceeds 600 pounds per square inch, enough to collapse metal, extinguish light, and silence a human heartbeat in less than a second. Then, at 9:12, the first sign of trouble surfaced. Not in a scream, but in a calmly spoken message: experiencing minor difficulties. Have a positive up angle, attempting to blow. There was static, but the crew's tone gave no hint of panic, just procedure. 4 minutes of silence followed. At 9:17, one last garbled transmission emerged from the depths. Only one word was intelligible: 900, and then nothing. Sonar operators heard what sounded like high-pressure air venting, an emergency ballast blow, but soon after came the unmistakable sound of metal collapsing in the deep. The Thresher had vanished. By that afternoon, 15 Navy ships were combing the area. There was no debris field, no survivors, just questions, mounting and multiplying as America came to terms with the deadliest submarine disaster in its history. The official explanation. In the months that followed the disappearance of the Thresher, the Navy launched one of the most exhaustive undersea investigations in history. Specialized vessels scoured the Atlantic seafloor with sonar, chasing acoustic trails and scattering hopes across thousands of square miles. It wasn't until June of 1964, over a year later, that they finally found her. The wreckage lay at a depth of 8,400 feet, shattered into 6 major sections, strewn across an area the size of several football fields. Her hull had imploded, compressed instantly by overwhelming pressure. The reactor compartment remained eerily intact. There was no radiation leak, no survivors, just twisted metal and silence. The Naval Court of Inquiry concluded that a silver brazed joint in the engine room piping likely failed under test depth pressure. Seawater then flooded in, shorted out electrical systems, and triggered a reactor shutdown. With power gone, propulsion failed. The crew tried to blow ballast tanks, but the emergency blow system may have iced over due to high-pressure air, rendering it ineffective. The Thresher, now a dead weight, descended past crush depth. This explanation, logical, detailed, and convenient, was accepted widely. The Navy initiated the SubSafe program in response, overhauling submarine construction and safety protocols. Silver brazing was banned in critical systems, and crew emergency training intensified. But within naval acoustic circles, a quiet unease remained. There were signals that didn't fit, silences where there should have been noise. Crucially, one analyst, a young lieutenant named Bruce Rule, believed something was missing, not from the wreckage, but from the story itself. While the official narrative focused on mechanical failure, Rule had been listening to something else entirely. The sound of the Thresher dying in real time, and the secrets those sounds refused to keep. The sound they chose to ignore. In 1963, few people knew about SOSUS, the Navy's secret underwater surveillance system designed to track Soviet submarines. Hidden across the ocean floor, this network of hydrophones recorded acoustic data in incredible detail, capturing every hum of machinery, every burst of sound that passed through the deep. One of the analysts stationed at the Sound Surveillance Center in Norfolk, Virginia, was Lieutenant Bruce Rule, a 25-year-old naval acoustics specialist who had been trained to read these patterns like a second language. When the Thresher vanished, Rule examined the recordings from that morning. What he found did not match the Navy's narrative. The data showed the main coolant pumps running normally at first. Then, at 9:09 a.m., the power feed to the pumps became unstable. 2 minutes later, the electrical bus failed entirely. The pumps shut off. The reactor scrammed. Propulsion was lost. Crucially, there were no sounds of massive flooding, no explosive bursts of seawater, no pipes failing under pressure. To Rule, this wasn't a case of flooding at all. It was an electrical system failure that rendered the submarine dead in the water, falling through the ocean with no ability to slow or surface. Rule presented his findings to the Court of Inquiry, but the panel, unfamiliar with SOSUS and reluctant to acknowledge a potentially deeper flaw in the Navy's reactor systems, dismissed him. Some even pressured him to change his conclusion. Instead of revisiting the evidence, the Navy doubled down on its flooding theory. Rule's charts were filed away under layers of classification, lost to everyone but a few specialists. And the story that made its way into official history books became one of pipe failure and poor welds, not the haunting silence of a reactor that had gone dark in the deep. Buried data, rising truth. 50 years after the Thresher was lost, Bruce Rule was no longer a young lieutenant. He had become the Navy's top acoustic analyst, with over 4 decades of experience decoding submarine signatures. But one conviction had never left him. The official story was wrong. In 2013, Rule decided it was time to break the silence. That April, he published his full analysis in Navy Times, revealing SOSUS data the public had never seen. According to his reconstruction, Thresher's electrical systems failed before any sign of flooding. The reactor had shut down after power to the coolant pumps was cut, leaving the submarine unable to rise. His findings caught the attention of retired Navy Captain James Bryant, who had commanded 3 Thresher-class subs. Bryant demanded answers and filed a lawsuit to force the Navy to release over 3,000 pages of suppressed investigation files. The Navy resisted, claiming national security. But in 2020, a federal judge ordered the documents released. What emerged was stunning. Internal Navy records showed that alternative explanations, including Rule's, had been considered as early as 1963, but were quietly dismissed. Even more chilling were logs from the United States ship Seawolf, a submarine that had joined the search shortly after the disaster. Crew members reported strange underwater sounds, possible signals, perhaps even distress pings, from the deep more than 24 hours after Thresher's supposed implosion. Officially, survival at such depth was impossible, but the very existence of those signals cast a long shadow over everything the Navy had claimed. The hidden risk that still exists. By the time Rule's analysis and Bryant's legal battle forced open the Navy's archives, another troubling revelation emerged, one that extended the danger far beyond Thresher. In 2005, a classified review of submarine safety found that more than a third of United States operational submarines had experienced at least one critical electrical bus failure. The exact type of failure Bruce Rule believed doomed the Thresher. These failures weren't theoretical. They happened during active patrols, training exercises, and even wartime readiness operations. In most cases, they were quietly logged, patched, and moved past without fanfare. But their implications were profound. The same vulnerability, unstable power distribution to reactor coolant pumps, was still possible decades after the Thresher was lost. The Navy had responded to the original disaster with SubSafe, a sweeping overhaul focused on preventing flooding. But Rule's conclusion suggested that the root cause had been electrical, not mechanical, and SubSafe didn't address that. This wasn't just a historical correction. It was a warning still relevant today. For all the focus on hull integrity, weld quality, and ballast systems, the silent heartbeat of every submarine was still the electrical grid that kept the reactor alive. If that heartbeat stopped again, the outcome could be just as catastrophic. The Thresher vanished in silence, but its truth is finally rising. If this story moved you, share it with someone who still believes in asking hard questions. Subscribe for more untold revelations. And remember, sometimes, the most dangerous failures are the ones buried too deep to hear.